Welcome to this rapid revision video looking at the nuclear arms race. This includes the creation of NATO and the Warsaw Pact, which we'll begin with. NATO versus the Warsaw Pact. In 1949, the West responded to what they saw as the threat of Stalin's USSR to Berlin and other Western countries. This was prompted by both the Berlin crisis and the takeover of Czechoslovakia in 1949. The USA, Britain, France and 9 other Western countries formed the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. The central principle behind this alliance was, and is, that if any one of the member nations was attacked, then all the other nations would come to their defence. This is something that's still mentioned in the news today, as it is Article 5 of the NATO Charter. This is what it says. The parties agree that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all, and consequently they agree that if such an armed attack occurs, each of them will assist the party or parties so attacked by taking such action as it deems necessary, including the use of armed force, to restore and maintain the security of the North Atlantic area. In other words, if one NATO country is attacked, all of NATO will come to their defence. That's a pretty quick way to start a world war. Of course, NATO wasn't trying to start a world war. It was trying to prevent one happening by deterring the USSR from trying to attack NATO nations. The USSR would see that the consequences of attacking a NATO nation were so great that hopefully they wouldn't do it. To this end, in May 1955, West Germany was allowed to join NATO. But the USSR saw this as an increased threat to themselves, and in response they formed a defensive alliance of their own. This was known as the Warsaw Pact. This alliance consisted of the USSR, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, Albania and the West Germany. Together they formed the Eastern Bloc, as it was known, and like NATO they would go to each other's defence if attacked. Like Cominform, although different countries made up the alliance, they were under the control of the USSR. With two huge military alliances confronting each other, any war had the potential to quickly become a world war. Developments in weapons raised the stakes even further. This is where we start our look at the arms race. The first atomic bombs were the result of the Second World War Manhattan Project, with 2 such bombs used to destroy the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, ending World War II. This photograph shows the mushroom cloud rising after the strike on Hiroshima. The USA hoped that this new weapon superiority would make them more secure, but a massive effort, and let's be honest, some spying by the Soviets, meant that they had soon caught up. From that point, there was competition to have the most weapons, of the greatest power, that could be delivered over the greatest range. This was the start of the arms race. And before we get into it, it's worth putting together a glossary so that we understand the terms we're dealing with. Let's start with conventional weapons. These are so-called normal weapons, which excludes nuclear, chemical and biological weapons. These are broadly the ones that were used in World War II, up to the point where they dropped the atomic bombs. Then there's the H-bomb, a nuclear weapon of 1,000 times the power or more of the World War II atomic bombs. They used hydrogen. That's why they're called H-bombs. This shows the mushroom cloud of a hydrogen bomb. You can see it's significantly larger than the one before. And then there's the ICBM, the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile. A missile with enough range to reach a different continent, often delivering at least one, sometimes multiple, nuclear warheads. These effectively fly up into space and then re-enter the Earth's atmosphere and then will drop onto a target or split into multiple warheads landing on multiple targets. A truly terrifying prospect. We're going to put together a basic comparative timeline for the arms race now. You'll see that at various points one side has the upper hand, but then the other side soon catches up. We start of course with 1945 with the USA when they first used the atomic bomb. But it didn't take long for the USSR to catch up. They tested their own atomic bomb in 1949. Then in 1952 the USA detonated the first hydrogen bomb. But in the following year the USSR caught up and they developed and detonated their first hydrogen bomb. Then the USSR actually gets the head start. They tested their R-7A rocket. This was the world's first intercontinental ballistic missile for delivering nuclear weapons. And in 1957, the USA developed their own ICBM, the Atlas. So here we can see that the USA often has the upper hand, but when it doesn't last very long. And when it came to missile deliveries, well, the USSR had the upper hand there. Let's consider some of the consequences of this arms race. With each new development, the superpowers increased the deadly potential of their armed forces. Through most of the 1950s, they had enough nuclear weapons to destroy the world several times over. The alliances NATO and the Warsaw Pact made potential miscalculations even more costly. Any war between these powers would soon balloon into a third world war. A full exchange of nuclear weapons could lead to mutually assured destruction, meaning that both sides would be equally destroyed. There would be no winner. This in turn changed the nature of war. Weapons were no longer the means of winning a war. Nuclear weapons were the way of preventing war happening in the first place. This idea is known as nuclear deterrence. In other words, the use of nuclear weapons would be so serious and the consequences so severe that no one would ever dare do it. But if you didn't have the deterrent, then you might be inviting your enemies to attack you first. This is a dangerous balancing act, and it's well shown by this cartoon showing Khrushchev of the USSR sitting on an H-bomb and Kennedy of the United States also sitting on an H-bomb. They're in this arm wrestle. They're both balanced at this moment, both straining, and neither of them winning or losing. But each has a finger hovering over a so-called button, which at any moment could set off mutually assured destruction. This was terrifying. Any war between the superpowers could end life on Earth as we know it. Let's set up our final points then. Atomic and nuclear weapons are bombs of incredible power and danger. In the 1950s, an arms race to develop the most effective nuclear weapons was developed. The USA was first, and they used atomic bombs in 1945 at the end of World War II, in fact the only time that nuclear weapons have been used in anger during a war. But then the USSR soon caught up, testing their own in 1949. The USA re-established their supremacy with the more powerful hydrogen bomb in 1951. The USSR, though, tested their own H-bomb just a year later. These bombs, though, were intended to be delivered by conventional bombers. But then the USSR developed the first ICBM, or Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, in 1957. The USA tested their own ICBM in the same year. The formation of NATO and the Warsaw Pact alliances made any potential nuclear war potentially even more devastating, leading to the terrifying prospect of mutually assured destruction. That concludes this video on NATO, the Warsaw Pact and the arms race. If it's been useful to you, please do like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you're desperate for a topic for me to do, pop it in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for watching and goodbye.